Welcome this evening to episode 2 of the Pro Wrestling Reality Podcast. Tonight, we are going to be taking a look into a very troubling situation that has exploded this afternoon. We had a very troubling situation, regarding which I think was an absolute misunderstanding regarding this not AEW, sorry, this is live, folks. GCW superfan Blank Jug Mike. And before anybody says anything, yes, I am going to refer to him as Blank Jug, as, the name, which I'm sure a lot of fans are very familiar with at this point, I think is rather troubling. And to tell you the truth, I was beyond confused when it came to the situation and the history surrounding it. So, first of all, I am, of course, going to say, rest in peace. It's troubling, when somebody passes regardless of the situation. And for us, as fans of this major entertainment industry, it's hard losing one of our own. So we're just gonna open shoot about it tonight. If there's any questions, feel free to either type them in the chat or leave them in the comments, and we'll get to it here. So I first heard of this Blank Jug Mike on Twitter. I seen posts from former New York entertainer Matt Cardona. He was saying, rest in peace, Blank Jug. And as you can see in the photographs, I guess from what I understood when I seen those tributes was that this was a possibly ailing, physically frail super fan. Now, they're referring to him as Blank Jug. One of the photos, you can see it there now, is Blank Jug lifting his shirt up, and I don't really understand. I guess he's kind of doing that classic truffle shuffle that was once popular, I believe, in the 1980s. And he's holding this jug of, well, I don't think I need to be too descriptive of a jug that looks like some biological waste had been emptied into it. Now, I'm just gonna get right into it here because I have my tweets available here for the episode. So I just want to make sure that I know what I'm saying here because, when I first seen this whole thing, I had questions. I was very, very confused. I didn't understand the whole idea. And I'm gonna get into what I believed was the situation surrounding the superfan. Now, I'm going to start off by mentioning GCW. Not particularly something I've followed. The most I know about it is, and of course we talked about him before on the program, that entertainment hardcore legend Mick Foley was somebody who openly endorsed this federation. They got the big exposure by having Mick in the middle of the ring with the microphone, openly embracing this federation. But time and time again throughout Twitter and other various social media platforms, there's been a lot of troubling clips, a lot of very dangerous situations that the performers have been putting themselves in. Yesterday, for good Lord, I came across a clip where an entertainer for this promotion was bunk naked. Flapping and floundering on the ring mat. And I didn't see the whole performance, so I don't know the context. I know we've kind of had those situations before. I mean, about a decade ago, Ric Flair would do a spot during his performances that had to do with having his clothes removed. And he'd be kind of floundering and flopping around in his undergarments. But, good Lord, this was like a whole different level, compared to something like that. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I read the comments. And some of them were saying, there could be children present at this event, Could you imagine? I mean, good Lord. I mean, could you imagine being a father, who grew up, with legends like Terry, legends like Calloway, legends like Shawn. And, you want to share something that you grew up with that was very close to your heart with your child now. And you hear that this GCW promotion is coming to town. And, you want to share a moment like this with your child. And, if you see one of those original legends, you can kind of say, that's who Dad grew up watching when he was your age. If someone like Foley, happened to come out to the ring. But good Lord, I couldn't imagine, taking my own son or daughter, to an event where a man is essentially stripped nude and then flipping and flopping on the ring. I mean, it's just beyond anything I've seen in this industry. And when I looked at the comments, there was a lot of concern. So as far as I can tell, in having a bit of a crash course with this promotion, is that they are rather risque. A little more based on blood and brawling around on the floor. So yesterday was when I started seeing all these tributes pouring in for seemingly a GCW superfan who goes by the name, as we mentioned on the show, the name will be censored on this program, Blank Jug Mike. And I am going to read the original message here. So this is from GCW directly. With sadness, GCW mourns the loss of one of our greatest fans, Mike, and I hope I get this name correct, Bazak. Mike loved traveling and traveled to many GCW shows across the country. We will remember him for his smile, his passionate cheers from the front row, and of course, his blank jug. Rest in peace, Mike. We will miss you. And, that is a very sensitive situation. And I think in one way it's very touching that this federation went out of their way to show how much the loss of a super fan really is to them. I believe that is very powerful to see something like that. So, I was very confused and I reached out. I said to GCW directly, and I was simply inquiring, here's what I said. I said, was the blank jug due to a medical condition? Or, I don't really understand the situation here. or why this seemingly mega GCW superfan is being celebrated for carrying a blank jug. Was it due to his condition that he used it in a celebratory, positive manner? Now, I'm going to explain that here and what I meant by that, because I think I'm going to read some of the responses that were absolutely shocking. I mean, I went off my phone and I went back on, and I had about 100 messages, 100 notifications regarding my comments. So, first off, I mean, if you take a look at the gentleman, and not to be offensive, but I'm just kind of calling it how I seen it in the moment. You could tell the guy may have a medical issue or two, and they did explain that he was suffering from cancer, which there's no excuse or joke for any kind of situation like that. I think many of us have known someone, a loved one or family member, who had been affected by that situation. I have myself, so I'm definitely not joking about his condition or making any kind of light of it at all. But, the guy doesn't look like the exact picture of health. And hey, sometimes I could say the same thing about myself. So, but that's initially what I see. When I seen the picture, the first picture I seen of him was the one with him lifting his shirt to former New York entertainment name Cardona. And when I seen the blank jug that he was holding, the first thing that sort of came to mind was that essentially an ailing fan, had been burdened with something like a catheter bag, perhaps. And when he traveled, a requirement of that was that he was to have, a place to distribute his biological waste. So, I can imagine if you were burdened with a situation like that, it wouldn't be the easiest thing to live with, especially if you want to travel, you want to go shopping, you want to go out to a restaurant on a Friday night, or, having to essentially carry something like that around with you due to a biological, medical crisis, that it wouldn't be something easy to live with. I can totally understand that, and I get that. So what I thought was that, in a way, Blank Jug Mike was using that blank jug to sort of, show that he's facing adversity head on. It's a part of who he is. It's something he has to live with. And, that it should be celebrated, and that's what I seen it as. And I thought essentially the GCW roster was, really running with this idea. We should embrace this, because I think deep down that it was a very positive message. I thought, because of his condition and having that physical burden, catheter, needing to carry around that blank jug, it was something that he and the roster wanted to turn into a positive. And, I asked the question. I was like, what's the deal with the blank jug? And not even a minute later, I swear to gosh, I'm just getting the comments up here now. And I'm going to call these people out because, I think that they really shouldn't be using this kind of language in a situation like this. So, one of the first responses was seemingly from a entertainment name, and if I'm pronouncing this name correctly, Tony Deppine. It says one-time ROH World TV Champion. He has the email there for the bookings. He told me, he died of cancer, you blanking blank. And, I fired right back. I said, good Lord. You don't need to talk like that and make my question into something it isn't. He passed away from cancer, and that has my deepest sympathies, especially to a fan of this industry. But the whole blank jug thing, I mean, was that sort of taking ownership of his condition and, celebrating it openly. And, I had comments, this one person here, Ace Diamond, says just delete your Twitter at this point. Good God. One person responded to my inquiry by saying, this dude died and you're making a deal about his blank jug. There are special places in blank for you. And, that comment hit me really hard because, I got this Cody says I'm a complete blank tard. I mean, my God, some of these people, I did get my answer. Essentially, I did get my answer. Now, what I didn't understand was this had nothing to do all along with his condition or, anything to be celebrated. I guess it just came down to the fact that he would travel from arena to arena with a jug of iced tea. And I guess from what I understand, because like I said, today was the first day I've heard of this character, this super fan. And I guess what he would do, if I'm just getting my information, I want to make sure I get my information correctly here. I just got another comment from this Bam Sullivan telling me to read the room and F off. That there's a time and a place and a way to ask these things. And some people did defend me, and I think this one super fan made a very great point. He said, it's a lot of first people's time hearing of blank jug Mike. I think it's a fair time and place to ask why he's called blank jug. That was totally my assumption. And as I mentioned, maybe the way I asked the question wasn't exactly appropriate. But I just didn't understand. I mean, could you imagine if you had a loved one die, like your own ailing mother, grandfather, or grandmother, and you start getting these comments, from people in your life saying, rest in peace, dirty mop rag. I mean, I don't understand why. Well, I guess I understand more now. But I didn't exactly understand why there was this focus on the blank jug. And the way I thought about it was that it was something sort of very progressive, very, empowering to people who may live with a situation like that. I mean, it cannot be easy, for those type of fans. But I think a federation like this GCW was ready to embrace something like this openly. And it kind of concerned me because I started seeing all these posts before I knew the answer to this blank jug Mike thing. And from what I understood, I mean, this was a very boundary line breaking, controversial federation. So there was a lot of people from that federation, including Joey Janela, Matt Cardona himself, and some other names that I haven't really heard of personally, were saying "Rest in peace, Blank Jug," and showing a picture of Blank Jug Mike, pouring this liquid down their throats. And they're making comments like, "Thank you for the blank. I'll miss the taste of his blank." And I mean, good Lord. I mean, I understand. I feel like in a way, maybe they were trying to, kind of embrace this Blank Jug Mike gentleman, this super fan, as almost like a part of the show. Like the fans themselves had character. But when I started thinking about it and understanding that this was in fact not necessarily due to a medical situation, or I started to find it slightly concerning. We talked about the industry star for this working for this GCW federation that was slipping and sliding and gyrating in the middle of the ring naked. So it does seem to me that this federation has a very sort of, dirty, grimy, gritty style compared to a lot of stuff that we might see up in New York or that we might see up in Florida. And it absolutely shocked me to see how defensive some people were that I didn't ask the question about his blank jug at the right time, or that I did it in an inappropriate way. And I don't think I did. And thank goodness there were a few people that actually came to my defense and said, this whole thing with the blank jug is ridiculous. So why would you get so worked up over somebody asking what was the deal with the blank jug? The whole idea of it being some kind of gimmick or some kind of character, totally over my head. For somebody who was dealing with a medical situation like that, I thought it was very empowering, and it was showing, I think, the GCW in a way wants to really take things to the next level. I mean, they might not be having superstars who are doing Make-A-Wish, but, they're showing that for somebody suffering with a debilitating medical situation, that they're very embracive. And, because the other idea of it was, I mean, if you took the situation literally, and there's a fan, traveling country to country, and for whatever reason, whether it be, some sort of, mental illness or, other kind of out of your hand situation, why would a guy be traveling town to town with a blank jug? I mean, is he a trucker? Is it actually urine in this jug? And if it was, if that was the situation, I would assume that he would be promptly escorted out of the arenas, or his urine would be confiscated at the door. But I guess when it really came down to it, what I learned was it was just a bottle of iced tea. And, a lot of people were and I was like, I didn't even think of that. I was like, okay, I get it. So this guy has this big jug, and they call him Blank Jug Mike, on his eulogy. I didn't really get that. We have one fan, Stony Schiavone, says his nickname was Blank Jug Mike. He carried around a gallon of green tea in it, and it looked like urine, essentially, is what he said. He's being celebrated because he was a fan of the promotion. and he passed away. And then he then goes on, to insult me and insult the program and insult my journalistic integrity by saying, you're really blanking bad at putting together context clues. And I'm just thinking, context clues? I mean, good Lord. I had never seen anything like this reaction in this industry. But we ask the tough questions here at Pro Wrestling Reality. We don't dance around things. But, I will admit that maybe the way I asked the question was a little inappropriate, a little animated. But, all of us here on the show, we do our best to ask the tough questions when they present themselves. And, we got some... We got some wild guys there at the switchboard, and I'm also going to thank the translators, for their great work on the program. A lot of research is handed to me. We have an insider, a New York insider, Jay, the journeyman janitor, who's somebody who works very closely with that New York-based company. And he's able to provide us information from time to time. So everybody, on behalf of everybody at Pro Wrestling Reality here, I do apologize, and I would say rest in peace. I'm not even going to call him Blank Jug. I'm going to just say rest in peace, Mike, GCW superfan. So now that we got that out of the way, we have a lot of comments on Twitter saying that they're saying just say blank, basically, essentially referring to the urine. And I'm not going to use that language because, quite frankly, I think it's vile. I mean, like, you go from a guy naked rolling around in the ring getting the pinfall with his behind, clearly under the arena spotlight, to calling this guy Blank Jug and drinking out of his jug of iced tea, and I say that in quotation marks, iced tea, because it was never mentioned that this whole thing. I mean, you would not believe the amount of questions we had tonight, and we do have a comments from SC's back. Welcome to the program tonight. And he says, keep up the good work. If you have any questions or comments on tonight's situation, let us know and we will do our best to answer them. But back to this situation, because I want to keep this as a tribute to Blank Jug Mike. I just want to express that, even though I had so many, basically I have the whole federation, hot, looking for me after my comments. And, I just don't think that's fair because I essentially just asked a question. What's with the blank jug? Can you explain it? And I did say that, I'm like, I have one person here, Jesus Blank, I'm not going to say the full name, for any of our religious viewers out there. What's your issue? You're just looking for something to be mad at. Yeah, it's a question. What is this person thinking? He then goes on to mock mental illness and pointing the finger at me, saying, do you have this specific mental illness? And you're flying off the handle for nothing. And I think that's far from the case. I think if you go to the original tweet, which you can find at Pro Wrestling Reality on Twitter, that I think I asked the question very respectfully. I just was very confused. I didn't get it. But there's been a history of some very colorful characters that travel, and follow this industry very closely. But I never seen something like this. And the way that they're all kind of coming together and explaining to me who this guy is was not on tap for tonight. They just instantly got defensive and started assuming, you're just trying, basically I was getting F you, you don't know what you're talking about. And this is from big names, like Cardona, like Janela, which is pretty upsetting. And I did have a couple people come to my defense and say, it's a question. You know, not a lot of people are going to see rest in peace blank jug and be like, what's the deal with that? You know, the pictures that I'm showing on the slideshow tonight are my first times even setting eyes on him. I'm not a week-to-week or month-to-month GCW viewer. You know, and I just got absolutely demolished by it, you know. And people are like, why are you asking about the jug when somebody passed away, dude? Just give me a minute to find some of these questions here. Or Twitter. Somebody says I'm a complete blanking idiot. Are you blanking 12 years old? Good, Mom. The whole thing is just blowing up. I never meant for it to get to this level. I never, ever in my life believed that I would cause this much controversy. And there was a great comment I made where I was trying to understand why some of these industry names were getting so worked up over the way they presented this guy. I mean, if they just came out and said, rest in peace to GCW Super, my fan. Oh, 1 second here. We do have a comment, and I will try to respond to that. SC's back with the comment tonight saying, I'm guessing you asked about the jug because it was apparently part of the guy's identity. No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I had no idea. I mean, what I thought, and I'm kind of repeating myself because I talked about this at the beginning of the program, was if you take a look at the gentleman, I mean, he does look sort of unhealthy. And as I said, I'm no perfect picture of health myself. They did identify that he passed away very suddenly from cancer. So what I was under the assumption was that this was a gentleman who was suffering, you know, from the burden, the medical burden, whatever his situation was, of having to carry around a blank jug. And the way that GCW was kind of embracing it and making him a character and involving that in the show was something kind of very powerful, you know, embracing something that's a burden, you know, learning that this is a part of who you are. That's why I asked, because I was just like, I didn't, like, they worked me. I mean, that some people were even saying, I mean, Mike would be looking down, happy that he's still working people, because that's exactly where my mind went. Like, is this actually a jug of biological waste? I wasn't thinking that it was iced tea as, oh, are you an idiot? Don't you know it's iced tea? No, I didn't. I'm not a week-to-week viewer. I'm not a month-to-month pay-per-view subscriber. I just seen a lot of very high-profile industry names shout out this guy. And they were just referring to him as Blank Jug. If they just said, rest in peace, GCW superfan Mike Berwitzks, or, excuse me, whatever his name was, I wouldn't have even batted an eye. But, you know, they're showing the pictures. They're calling him Blank Jug without the context. It was just a question. I mean, yes, did I ask it at the wrong time? I will very much admit that. But I am still getting comments here. My Twitter's been going all day. I mean, I just got a comment from a guy saying, blank off, you blanking mark. Just for the way I phrased the question. You know, I did have a little bit of support because people were saying in the comments, no, the dude's just asking. Like, it's a very bizarre situation. It's very confusing the way you're wording this, the way you're celebrating, well, not celebrating, but the way you're mourning this guy is going to confuse people. And it's going to have people ask questions. If you bring up a guy and just refer to him as Blank Jug Mike, there's going to be questions. But at the same time, I mean, maybe I shouldn't have poked and prodded. You know, maybe I should have waited a week or two and let it, you know, maybe I could have just looked up on the internet, you know, maybe. But, you know, I actually thought it was something to be celebrated, that if GCW was going in that direction of embracing somebody's medical situation the way they did and kind of making it a part of the show. I would have celebrated them for that. Excuse me, I'm just taking a drink. We've seen that up in New York with that Connor's Cure situation. I mean, of course, I was a much younger super fan, but, his situation ended up basically getting to the point where he laid down, or where Paul Levesque, WWE massive industry mind, great businessman, laid down and let this child with cancer get the 1, 2, 3. And we have another comment from SC's back saying, it's almost as if you aren't in the in crowd of the promotion. You aren't allowed to ask. And that's exactly right. That is exactly right. And I find that it is very much that way with a lot of these federations. I mean, most of the people I know who follow this industry very closely are either watching New York programming or they're watching Florida programming. And, that's kind of it. And I think if you're a fan of this industry, you're sort of moderately versed in both promotions. But if you get involved in a fan that's, all caught up in this New Japan crap or a GCW or one of these other, C promotions, and you ask a question, you get eviscerated. It's like, oh, well, how dare you not know who Blank Jug Mike is, and how dare you ask about his blank jug? Like, I get it. Yes, the guy passed away. It may not have been the best time to present these questions, but I was just very genuinely curious. And it blew my mind to how, I'm trying to get the messages, but on my tour, it's every time I go on my notifications, it's just scroll, because there's so many people just like, you're an idiot. How can you ask about the jug at a time like this? Here's a great comment from somebody who was very kind and kind of defending me. I'm just going to read this. Some people are, oh my gosh. Some people are even deleting their comments. I have no idea why. Some of them were pretty rude to me, so who knows? Maybe they felt bad. Somebody said, not a lot of people carry around a jug of urine with them. It's a valid question, whether you like it or not. This dude is just asking about the blank jug. Clearly, we have no business in knowing if he carried around jugs of urine with him or not. And now he's passed away. I can see why people are so curious. SC's back makes another comment. They've become unhinged. If you're talking about fans of those C promotions, you are absolutely right. Sometimes it's even the same with New York or Florida. And I will remind fans tonight, I'm not sure if it'll work or not, but if you have a question or you want to appear with your voice or whatever it is on the program, if you look at the description, I did provide that link for the call-in, but I just don't know if it works or not, so we're going to kind of leave it at that. So I'm just going to kind of go back again and touch on that topic. I think a lot of the fandoms for these promotions have become very much of a boys' club. I think a lot of it, what I started to notice, it was from that Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Florida put out this tweet, saying, Forbidden Door, what would you like to see? And I commented and I said, I'd love if they brought down some of those Philadelphia boys, from that original era, and kind of matched them up with some of these young dudes now. And I had comment after comment. Oh, you blanking idiot. They're talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling. Don't you know that, Forbidden Door is a New Japan? I just seen Forbidden Door and I was thinking, promotion versus promotion. I wasn't equating it with just that Far East promotion being involved down in Florida. So you are correct. A lot of fans are getting very defensive. It's like, if you don't go to your absolute furthest lengths to learn about these promotions and you ask a genuine question, people do get really defensive. People do get really defensive. And that's a lesson I learned today, because I just genuinely reached out and tried to ask, because I didn't get it. I was like, is this gentleman carrying around a jug of urine? And why? That's all that went through my head. I didn't know that it was iced tea. So basically what it was he would stand around ringside and people would go up to him and, because I've seen the clips on YouTube since hosting this program tonight. And so I guess when the wrestlers would get beat up, they would go to the guardrail and they'd grab the jug and they'd drink from it. And the announcers would be saying, that's blank, that's urine, that's, oh my God, that's blank jug Mike, handing them the urine, and they drink it and they kind of, hulk up, for lack of a better term. So I guess if maybe I would have seen that first, I might have understood. But where exactly is the context that this isn't a guy that's doing that? So essentially it is, he's working me. Blank jug Mike is working me. I totally bought it. But in a way, I'm just very shocked that people were very offended by the way I asked the question. If you didn't hear what I was talking about, you can listen to the replay. I'm just sort of looking at the comments here in response to my inquiry, because it's just absolutely crazy. I'm going to read that comment in just a moment, but I'm just reading some comments. Somebody says, under my question, I have the social awareness of a blanking grape. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely very common to just casually know why a guy is walking around with a blank jug at a public event. We got a comment here. Let's see what we got here. Love the fans. All of you have been great. Love reading your comments. SC's back. Thank you for joining us tonight. Very much appreciate your participation. And he says, it's an odd reaction. If you want more eyes on the promotion you care about, eviscerating people who ask questions to become more informed isn't exactly the way to be booked. Well, exactly. And here's what I talked about earlier on tonight's program was, all I know of GCW is that Foley, who we talked about on the prior episode, and his political ties, and, that he's, well, we're not going to get into that now, but basically, essentially, Foley was somebody who gave this promotion, like, the thumbs up, essentially, saying, he did a promo in the ring, he's very supportive of Moxley. I think he did some commentary on Nick Gage Moxley match. And I think at the time, Foley was hot to get in there. I do believe that at that time. That was only a year or so ago. But he openly embraced the product. And then, on the other hand, we are constantly seeing these clips on Twitter. It's not like I didn't know what GCW was. I'm very familiar with a lot of the clips that are posted of people doing very risky moves and very risky spots, which some have been absolutely stomach turning, over the past year or so. So that's really all I knew about it, that it was a bit more of a groundbreaking, controversial. Hold on, I'm just reading this comment here. Are the attacks you're receiving that's a great question. So are the attacks that I'm receiving from the GCW talent making me want to tune in frequently? Honestly, no, absolutely not. And here's the thing. Yes, I'm a huge fan of this industry. Do I watch all promotions? Am I up till 3 and 4 in the morning watching the GCWX Japan all new? No. Way too much of it now. I think that's why a lot of original era fans like myself are starting to fall up, because there's too much all the time. And, going through a situation like this where you're just you see something, I wasn't exactly saying, oh, that's stupid. Like, I was just like, what's the situation here? Is it sort of like a Make-A-Wish type thing where they're embracing and celebrating a man's condition? Or are they just allowing this wacko to walk around with a jug of urine? And, because I've seen the level that sometimes that promotion goes to. As I mentioned a couple times already, they have naked wrestlers basically doing matches just holding their hands over their genitalia. So God only knows what could be going on with the fans. SC's back says the market is oversaturated. Oh, you better believe it. You better believe it. One thing I will say, especially with New York having that major WrestleMania season coming up, the cards just aren't as hot as they once were. I mean, if you go back and you watch, a Goldberg WCW 1998 or 1999 match. One perfect example I always use is Hogan versus Goldberg. Bill, Nitro for the world title. The arena was absolutely shaking that night. Tell me from the year 2010 to 2023, when has the arena absolutely shaken like that? If you can provide me a match, send it to my Twitter, DM me on Twitter and say, here you go. Here's something that matches up to that, but I just don't think we'll ever see it. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I want to cover, because I'm definitely going to announce that actually right now I am working on a new investigation. And just to give a little hint on what it's about, I'm going to just talk about this openly for the fans who've made it this far into the episode. A lot of fans have a lot of reverence for Paul E. Heyman, and I am not one of those people. I was a fan of that original Philadelphia promotion at its peak, and years later, watching the tapes, begging my uncle, could you tape me the ECW pay-per-view? Because he was a big fan of this industry. Taught me a lot about this industry. And, I'd be like, can you take me some of that ECW? He said, no problem. And so that's how I experienced it. I didn't necessarily, and he was one of those guys, back, I'm trying to think what year this was, probably 1999, 2000, had back in the trailer park days, big ass satellite right in behind the trailer. And he had all that ECW access back then. So that's how I learned of it. And just the more, I have the DVDs, I have the tapes, and just the amount of blood shedded for that promotion, the amount of broken necks, broken backs, it's unlike anything that you've ever seen in any other promotion. Other than maybe the FMW, which is a promotion that I would like to cover someday, but I just unfortunately don't know enough about. Heyman has a great mind for the business, but his unscrupulous means as a boss. Oh, you hit it on the head, and that's exactly what I was about to say. So I'll ask fans in attendance tonight. We've seen it. Good God, it's probably been about 11 or 12 years now. Week after week, whose face do you see, next to the New York World Champion? Almost just, every week for about 11, 12 years. Who has his hands all over that New York World title? Alongside Brock Lesnar for a long time, and now alongside Roman Reigns. It's Paul E. And that really troubles me, and that is going to be the topic of my next video. I entitled it, broken necks and bad checks. Ever since he swapped that ECW ball cap for the WWF ball cap, I mean, so many talent just absolutely spiraled into the alcohol use, into the drug use, thrill sampling with women, and it has been troubling, and it really started to bother me, just the idea. I mean, is he a great mind for the business? Sure, in his peak. We have more comments. I'm just going to stop my train of thought and take a look. Owes many people money, if the stories are true. Yes, I will be touching on that. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to say too much on this episode, because I'm working on putting together the investigation now, and we have a lot of us here at Pro Wrestling Reality are looking up information, trying to find the truth behind it. But from what I understand, names like Dreamer, came out and said when he was at his peak, 29 years old, working for ECW, he was still living with his mother. And somehow, he really recognized that Paulie was struggling, and Dreamer absolutely believed in the promotion. And he convinced his own ailing mother to essentially, give Dreamer a loan so he could give that money to Paulie to float ECW a bit, as much as he could with what he could. The number hasn't been thrown out. There hasn't been a number. It could have been $50. Could have been, we don't know. But in a conversation like that, I mean, I would assume that it would have been a significant amount. I mean, if you're asking for somebody for a loan and it's enough money to essentially keep a business running, I mean, it can't be, like asking your grandmother for $20 or something. I mean, good God. But there never was confirmation that an amount like that has ever been paid back. And we see Heyman week to week, out there with the big stars, rubbing his hands all over that New York title. That should possibly be a guy like a Rob Van Dam, or, there's so many names in that Philadelphia-based promotion that have just gone to the wayside and are just still out there floundering. And I'm going to talk about a couple specific instances in where you can tell that some of them are just not in a good place right now, and that they really are almost stuck in those original years, trying to recapture that glory. Well, on Twitter, we got Paulie, posing in his fancy suits and eating at fancy restaurants. Some of these original Philadelphia guys are wearing the same thing they wore 25 years ago. It's just, it's never really come out that Heyman was able to just reach out to these guys and say, hey, here's some money. You guys have been through hell. I traded the ECW ball cap for the WWF ball cap and never went back. So it's never been confirmed that he made things right, essentially. And that's always very much bothered me. SC's back. And again, I'm going to remind viewers tonight, I'm not saying this to you, SC, because you've been adding a lot to the conversation. I appreciate that. But any other viewer in tonight, if they want to do the call in, I'm not sure if it's working or not, but we are having guests. If we can figure out the technology here on the streaming service, we have the collab guests. So if you want to look in the description, you can find that and have your say, on this troubling situation or anything else you want to talk about tonight. But I'm going to read that comment. Heyman has a way to get people to believe in him, while simultaneously having his hand in your pockets like a cult leader. Very, very correct. I mean, there's all that footage of how much vitality and, speaking skill that Heyman once had. We've seen the infamous 1997 speech where he's almost kind of giving like a military-esque, morale boosting speech, rallying the troops. And so I get what you're saying. He has a way. And that's what I was mentioning was when this happened with Dreamer, taking this extensive amount of money out from his own ailing mother, to give to Heyman because he believed that original Philadelphia-based promotion was something worth saving. And this would have been in about 98, 99 when the product was really floundering, I believe. I think it was really at its peak from about 94 to 97. And as you go on until the end of the promotion, I mean, there's just not a lot of as memorable moments as there were in that initial run. But Paulie knew the ship was sinking. He still, allowed these guys to shed their blood, break their backs, give their necks, because that original Philadelphia-based promotion was something they believed in. Well, on the other side, Paulie was running off to Hollywood to film a small scene in a movie, and I guess during this time he was also in talks with New York. And I don't want to say too much because I'm working on the investigation now. There's a lot of information that is being emailed to me. I'm getting phone calls off the hook. I put the word out that this is the information I'm looking for. And I've been doing research on YouTube. And I found a few, like if you've seen some of these names, the peak of 95 to 99, they could sell an arena. But some of the situations that they're in recently related to this industry are very troubling. And what I'm calling for essentially is New York to induct that original Philadelphia-based company in the Hall of Fame as a group. I mean, I've been saying for years, I think Tommy Dreamer belongs in that New York Hall of Fame. And what did they do? They send him out in a freaking hot dog cart, down to the ring. Now, I don't understand. I'm going to ask the audience because I am Canadian. I don't know if we have any fans from the United States with us tonight, but I don't get the whole hot dog cart thing. I mean, to me, it would appear like that's kind of like a rib or a disrespectful thing to make someone have to do. Or, in a way, is it something more like a way to celebrate the common everyman? Because, to be like, hey, I'm just like you out there, you fans who are doing a blue-collared, hardworking job. Like a hot dog cart. They did it with Kane, and they did it with Tommy Dreamer. And when they did it with Tommy Dreamer in 2011, I believe, I knew that the company just did not have respect for this legend, And what I would like to see essentially now is if it's all we're going to get, I mean, we've seen the way China was inducted alongside the X. Like, I'd love to see, Dreamer, Raven, and maybe a couple other names. Not these guys like Bubba Ray or, guys who already got the, WrestleMania retirement weekend package, I guess I'll call it. But some really, I'd love to see Dreamer, Raven, Sabu, and, maybe just a throwaway like a Mikey Whipwreck, group like that in the Hall of Fame, and you can just call them the Philadelphia Originals, and just make mention of how influential they are. And for I'd love to see if Paulie would have anything to do with that, or if he would just shun away from it. We did see him openly give. Oh, that's another. I'm just going to respond to that comment. SC Zback mentions Stevie Richards, who actually, if you look on Twitter, I think I retweeted it on my Twitter account, Pro Wrestling Reality at twitter.com, that Richards is not well. There was a picture released of him in a hospital gown. And, he was all kind of hunched over and kind of wearing the hospital gown, the hair cover, and he had a big gray beard, and he had a walker, and it was horrifying. This was a guy, I've actually seen him live, at a WWE event. And this was a guy that I think was one of the ECW originals who always was in great shape. Great. He could have kind of been like the Shawn Michaels for that original Philadelphia-based promotion at that time. But when he went to New York, I just didn't think they really knew what to do with him. But when I got to see him, I kind of recognized. I was like, yeah, well, it's the opening match against the Hurricane or whatever, but this is Steven Richards, like one of those ECW originals. And actually, I seen Tommy Dreamer that night, too. Now that I think about it, I mean, good God, I'm absolutely honored. Another comment, SC's back asks, PWR, with as much clout as Heyman seems to have in that New York-based promotion, it makes you wonder. What? Exactly right. Exactly right. Why hasn't he pushed for that? Because I think, in a way, Heyman's, he wants to keep that cozy, major. I can't even imagine how much he's making right now. But it's just, I could never understand how that man can sleep at night, knowing he's got this whole roster of guys now. And you'll find out when I'll kind of break it down a little bit. I'm focusing on specific situations where some of that talent within the last few years have been in very troubling situations while they are still performing in this industry. And, it's silly to say, well, why can't Paulie have these guys on Raw or whatever? That's not exactly what I'm asking for. I just think that they should be recognized within that New York entertainment-based company for their contributions, because I just feel that even though Paulie, is very, it's hard to believe there's a whole generation now who just thinks of him as, the guy who comes out and says, Brock Lesnar. Like, they don't know all the backstage scheming and manipulation that, all the backs Heyman had to walk over just to have that spot, and I don't know. I just don't agree with it. But that's the investigation that I am working on currently. I wanted to try to do something a little different. I have been in university as well as working a full-time job, so it can be harder to do the other style videos that I do. I haven't even started the new season yet, but it is coming. So I wanted to try something a little different tonight for the fans. I think at 1 hour for tonight, we are going to call it an evening. Just wanted to give it a trial run, and, cover something that happened today that I thought was pretty explosive. I want to thank the fans who have been supportive and leaving your comment. I love reading the comments. There's been so much great insight. I'm just going to read the last comment here. As a kid, you used to have to try to stay up late and hope your parents didn't catch you watching that violent... Oh, brother, let me tell you. I'll end this off with a story before I go. I'll never forget this. This was probably the peak of 96. Something like that. Probably about 96, 97. I was I wouldn't necessarily say babysat because, I was getting older, but we had a family member who was kind of checking in on me as I was still, not totally independent, whatever. But we had a very religious neighbor who would come to check on me while my parents would go on vacation. And one evening she was like, well, I'll cook a supper for you and come over. She was kind of like a neighbor like that, kind of like a family member almost. But she was absolutely religious, like to the T. Like every morning, our grandmother would go visit her, and because our grandmother lived with us as well, would go over and they'd be having the tea, and she'd already have her Bible out, and this would be like 7 in the morning. So anyway, she invites me over for dinner while my parents are away, and I'm very used to being there. So she's like, "Do you want to watch a little bit of TV?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds good." She had cable at the time, we didn't. So, I throw on WWF programming, and, she's in the other room or whatever. And whose spectacular entrance do I see other than Goldust coming down in the full attire with the wig and the theme song and everything? And good Lord, this family friend gets one look at that, and she's just grabbing her chest, grabbing her rosary beads, and gasping, turning the television off right away. And actually, she called my parents to apologize, saying, I have no idea what he was watching. I very much apologize. It was not that I have anything against alternative lifestyles, but, for that time, I think that was a very confrontational character for a lot of older generation people to understand. So, had her almost crying on the phone. And then my parents, of course, they knew I was into this wrestling crap. So they were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We know what it is." Or by the way, she explained, they knew it was basically wrestling. So, it wasn't the violent wrestling that was a worry and our concern. With our family, it was the biologically charged situations that I guess caused an issue in our household. So anyways, thank you, fans, for listening. Very much enjoyed it. If anybody's listening to the live video afterwards, love to hear your comments. Leave your questions, and maybe we'll cover them in a future episode. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. This has been the Pro Wrestling Reality Podcast episode.